Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Value-Based Voices, a podcast from the Association for Value-Based Cancer Care. Each episode dives into the shifting terrain of cancer care in the United States, exploring what value means in today's clinical, policy, and patient-centered environments. Our mission is to spark informed dialogue, promote transparency, and equip every stakeholder from providers to payers to patients with the insight they need to navigate cancer care with clarity, confidence, and purpose. And let's get into it. Today's episode really takes all those words to heart when we will have an in-depth conversation on value-based insurance design, who should take the lead, and what impact it could possibly have on patient cost sharing. My name is Jayson Slotnik. I'm a partner at Health Policy Strategies and AVBCC board member, and I'll be your host for today's episode. It is really an honor for me to welcome back a huge friend of value-based cancer care, Mr. John O'Brien, who is Mr. Everything at the National Pharmaceutical Council. Really just needs no introduction. He has evolved into that sort of just one name person like Cher and Madonna. He's just known as O'Brien in healthcare circles. And so, John, please give us a few minutes, introduce yourself and your organization, and then we'll kick it over to Brian to do the same. And then the three of us will have an informal interview, conversation. So thank you very much for joining us today, John.
Well, thank you so much, Jayson. I've enjoyed learning from you over the last couple of decades, and it's great to be with you and Brian. I'm John O'Brien. I'm the president and CEO of the National Pharmaceutical Council. We're a 73-year-old health policy research organization based in Washington, D.C., and I'm really lucky to get to come to work every day with a team of researchers who join me in envisioning a world where prescription medicines are accessible to patients, valued by society, and sustainably reimbursed to ensure continued innovation. I'm a pharmacist by training. I've worked for drug companies, health plans, and I think most people know me from my time in the first Trump administration as Secretary Azar's Senior Drug Pricing Advisor.
So I'm Brian Reid. I'm a senior fellow at Tufts-CEVR. I write the Cost Curve newsletter. I go back a little bit with John as well. And so I'm excited, John, because we're grabbing you earlier this month. You and your colleagues wrote a piece for Health Affairs Forefront on basically suggesting that we are perhaps, if things go well, on the cusp of a new era when it comes to value-based insurance design. And that was the thesis is based on the idea that we are at an inflection point with PBM reform and PBM business practices. The joke on Wall Street is that the four most dangerous words in investing are "this time it's different." And so I want to start by saying, what is different this time about the PBM environment that might give us a crack into really making value-based insurance design a thing?
Well, first, thanks, Brian, for not just reading, but sharing the Health Affairs Forefront piece that came out, I guess, a couple weeks ago. That was a fun piece to work on with Yev and Kimberly. And the backstory is, as loyal Cost Curve Apex readers, we read with great interest sort of your discussion of what Cigna said in regards to their announcement about how they wanted things to be different, and Dave Ricks at Lilly's response when he said, look, we wish him well. We'd like to see a world where value drives formulary placement as opposed to the size of the rebate. And like me, Kimberly Westrich has been doing this for a long time. And we kind of looked at each other and said, my gosh, this feels like the mid-2000s when Michael Chernew and Mark Frederick were sort of just beginning to write about the work that they were doing with Pitney Bowes and other employers around designing benefit structures that actually made it easier for patients to get drugs that delivered more value. And so we went back to that work and the many years of work that NPC has done on that topic, and sort of juxtapose that over, where we are today. I'm a big Sean Greminger fan. I've heard Mark Cuban speak a lot, and if there's one thing that I'm sure of, it's that employers are aware of how the current system might not be serving them well. We've known for quite some time now that the current PBM model is broken. I think we published the first peer-reviewed publication talking about the role of rebate guarantees and how that was driving formulary decision-making. So we wanted to write a piece that kind of talked about a conversation that was 25 years old and yet has real meaning today when employers are saying, hey, maybe it's not rebates that we should be looking for. And the big three PBMs are realizing that the writing's on the wall and starting to talk about building new mousetraps. And we wanted to put a stake in the ground that said, hey, anyone who's thinking about doing things differently, let's start with getting high value medicines to patients without making them, jump through hurdles like high co-insurance or utilization management.
So John, just to pick up on that, Mark, you mentioned Mark. Mark was a keynote speaker at Value-Based Cancer Care a few years ago and made an indelible impression on a lot of the audience on those ideas. He was talking about having screenings be free and a lot on preventive medicines be free. Your standard value-based insurance enhancement designs, right? Investing in our future self, to say succinctly. How different do you see those as still being the primary drivers? And how would that be more specific for cancer care?
That was a great room to be in. You could almost feel people like running for the pitchforks and getting ready to like march on the insurance system to build a better mousetrap. But when I was in government, there were two problems we were trying to solve. One, why isn't our healthcare system interested in the best drug at the lowest price? And two, why are prescription medicines the only healthcare good or service where patient cost sharing is based on the billed amount or list price, not the allowed amount or net price? So I think the importance of this moment is making sure that this isn't a cost containment conversation. I think employers need to understand the pivot from how much are we spending to how well are we spending. And when we talk about people living with cancer, there may be no more important population to make sure that the patient is front and center in that conversation, and we're actually making sure that high-value medicines reach them.
And talk about a little bit more about so when we talk about making sure high-value medications reach them, what are the barriers that we're getting rid of here? And is there a cost to getting rid of those?
There are a couple barriers that jump to mind. First, if you think about the advances that we've made in cancer today, many of the medicines that are around would have been considered science fiction when I was in pharmacy school. And we're now treating breast cancer, for example, at home with a tablet or capsule. And we actually have 3 medicines in that class. And that's a really big deal. And, I just came back from the ISPOR meeting in Philadelphia, and there was a really important conversation that Sean Sullivan and some others led when they compared sort of the traditional cost effectiveness analysis price, which, not a big fan of traditional cost effectiveness, but it's something that gets talked about a lot at the ISPOR meeting. And they compared that price to the MFPs that Medicare published for their most recent round of negotiation. And what they found was that for about 4 drug indication combos, CMS might even be paying too much. And for another 4, the price might be just about right. And for 11 different drug indication combinations, the MFP is far below the traditional cost effectiveness price, which excludes a lot of things that are really important to patients. So my fear is that manufacturers who are doing the hard work of A, taking the risk to develop a medicine, B, getting that drug through an arduous approval process, and then C, developing the real world evidence to document how this affects things like living longer without your disease progressing or actually living longer. That value is not showing up in the CMS price setting process. So my fear is that when companies go through the hard work of demonstrating value, and they do that in medicines that just would have been unthinkable when I first started learning how to treat cancer, those medicines have less of a chance to reach patients today because our healthcare system doesn't value that evidence as much as they value the margin that can be extracted from the price of that medicine. And we could go around the horn and talk about how 340B drives those decisions, how rebates drive those decisions, how specialty pharmacy payments drive those decisions. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's a single person out there who's trying to treat cancer that doesn't agree that the most important decision to a medicine reaching a patient should be the value that it creates for that patient and the people who love them, not some financial incentive.
See, I'm a little bit more optimistic. I am optimistic that the PBM reform that we've been discussing and the work that you've been doing, John, is actually going to make a difference this time around. So to answer Brian's questions, and I come to that conclusion. I'll tell the following story, and then we can all react to it. Which is, as you know, the PBM is creating a lot more transparency. There's going to be a lot more data sitting on the desk of the HR department, broadly stated. And I've had some interesting conversations with HR employer consultants who have said to me that this has actually been something that the HR departments are scared about because they're going to have all this information. They are now fiduciaries under ERISA, and they are concerned that the plaintiff's bar will be all over them for making certain coverage decisions now based upon greater transparency of data and greater value of outcomes, because now there will be greater opportunity for them to at least understand your point, John, about value and have all this data and AI tools and sandboxes and skill sets and Claude and everything else will create, hopefully, a better opportunity for HR to do value-based assessments, to do value-based formularies, and more broadly, the insurance design. So maybe I'm being overly optimistic because I actually do know some pharma companies and others are going to start motivating around that point of sale, which is the HR department, and say, hey, look, we now have 3 oral solids that could treat breast cancer in the home. Why are we doing all these shenanigans with rebates? Go for pricing parity and let the physician choose and really take a hard look at benefit design in this regard, because unlike what we've seen when Mark came a few years ago, we have greater amounts of data and we have the tools to analyze the data. And so I'm a little bit more optimistic as a result of that for the next couple of years of some change. And I don't know if your research bore some of that out, John. And I know, Brian, you've been covering the business for a long time, PBM reform. So Brian, what do you think? And then we can go over to John.
Well, I think, John hit on it, and it comes up in the health affairs forefront piece. The question is always, and there was a great Axios newsletter on this as well. I think the question comes down to not is there transparency, but how do we use it? Particularly, how do employers use it? There's no question that the box is being opened at this point. The question is anyone going to look at it, and what do you do with that? Especially given that the system is not necessarily set up for simplicity. So, my view is that there's reason for optimism, but it's not going to come without some sweat equity on a lot of people's part. And I'm thankful for what John has done to kind of grease the skids for that. So John, I don't know if you've got a more optimistic take here on exactly how we take the what I hope will be a data deluge and make it into the kind of insurance benefit design policies that are going to do all the things: lower costs, lower burden on patients, incentivize innovation, all the above.
I share the optimism with some caution, right? And that's what we do as a research organization. So we're gonna follow those changes because the changes that we've been following thus far haven't been very patient friendly. We had a piece in Health Affairs Scholar that looked at changes in patient access to specialty drugs over the last few years, and we saw an increasing number of restrictions or exclusions in health plans on specialty medicines, including oncology, including orphan drugs for some rare cancers and other people living with rare diseases. So again, I just feel that the system that we have today is A, focused on cost containment, and B, using leverage to try to generate margin extraction as opposed to viewing medicines the way a patient would, which is something that helps them stay well, get healthy, and have a longer life or a lower total cost of care.
Can we go into the patient piece of this just a little bit? I'm curious for your thoughts about cost sharing. At this point, if you are a cancer patient, you're going to be subject to all manner of co-payments and co-insurance for medicines, for procedures, you name it. Is there a point to that, or does this just become a financial transaction for everyone, and the patient is kind of put in the middle?
Look, we have a healthcare system where everybody in the system benefits when the price of a medicine goes up, except for the patient. And all too often that's because we have a system that sort of prioritizes buying low and selling high. And the way that you do that is the way that you can extract those large, rebates and other incentives is by restricting access. And restricting access is essentially leveraging patients for financial gain, or what our friend Antonio would call the money from sick people, or Scott Gottlieb described it as the sick subsidizing the healthy. So that's what it feels like today. And the PBM reforms that have been put in place have seemingly signaled that it doesn't have to be this way unless an employer says, hey, you know what, like, we're going to waive our rights under all this stuff and keep doing things the old way. So the importance of making sure that the patient voice is heard in saying, no, I don't want to jump through giant financial hurdles that have been shown to increase abandonment at the pharmacy or decrease adherence. I would rather my insurance worked like insurance. I put money into a system so that it was going to be there for me when I got sick. I or my loved one got this diagnosis. The good news is there's a medicine that's available to help me. The bad news is you've put it on some high cost sharing tier that has a huge co-insurance, and because I may be in a HSA eligible high deductible health plan, I'm paying my cost sharing until I reach that deductible. And more often than not, that cost sharing is based on the list price of the medicine, and it doesn't include any of the discounts that the manufacturer is providing to the health plan.
Yeah, I've often proffered that patients, if given the choice, would spend an extra $5 to $7 a month on an actuarial value in premium to self-insure themselves against a large medical expense in the future. And so if we can eliminate patient copays or deductibles by sort of spreading that risk over every patient, and it was explained the right way, to your question, Brian, and to John's point, we could get to a place where those copays and the insurance system actually works because you're spreading all the risk to a much broader population and becomes an affordable exercise for the patients. It truly is what insurance should be.
Yeah, and this argument created some strange bedfellows. I think it was it Aaron Carroll in The Incidental Economist that basically said that cost sharing has no place in oncology care.
Yeah.
And Peter Kolchinsky, will frequently say, like, no one's going to fake a cancer diagnosis to get a medicine. Why are we using a demand side cost control to make them jump through hoops? So when I see those kinds of diverse voices agreeing on a topic, I think it's something for us to pay attention to.
And obviously there's clinical reasons to, not make things more difficult in general. So I've been looking at stats lately on, advanced or metastatic cancer. The chance of you going from a first line therapy to a second line therapy is kind of a coin flip. If you're a cancer patient, your care team you get one chance to pick the right regimen. It's not like, oh, geez, we're just going to step through this and hopefully we'll get it right the next time. There's a real cost in outcomes to having fewer options available to you. So, I think there's that cost thing, but there's also this clinical decision making that, I feel like cancer's unique in that respect.
Yeah, and Brian, this brings something else up to me. I think it was a 2019 J.P. Morgan meeting, and I'm listening to the J&J presentation, and I'm taking notes, and I thought I heard Scott White say that they were making progress on a subcutaneous version of a treatment for multiple myeloma, and I looked up and I said, are we really now able to treat cancer subcutaneously, with an injection in an office, as opposed to having someone need to sit in a clinic? So I'll tease some upcoming ASCO research that we have being displayed next month. Now that we have more and more versions of oncology medicines that are available subcutaneously, as opposed to making patients go to that clinic, that infusion center, and sit in that chair, we're watching to see what payer coverage looks like. I think it's safe to say that today most plans view IV and sub-Q at par, but nobody's preferring sub-Q yet. So that's a space that we're going to be watching to make sure that it doesn't go the wrong way, and heaven forbid we make patients receive the IV unless they can demonstrate some good reason to get the subcutaneous formula, their formulation. And in fact, what we should be seeing is it becoming easier for people to get access to the form of the medicine that is most friendly and convenient to them.
And that's not just about patients either. I mean, you talk to the providers themselves, and there's a lot less healthcare resource utilization when you don't have to bolt on a whole other, process for, infusing a medicine. So if you want to just be the green eye shade guy, there's reasons not to treat them as equal value too. I mean, it's great. And trust me, it's great news for the patients, but there's all these other benefits too that, to your point, are not necessarily usually considered when we go through that cost analysis, process or when payers look at, where their bread's going to get buttered.
So my question for the both of you is as follows. We've spent the last 20 minutes or so talking about levels of optimism, perhaps some changes to insurance design because of regulatory oversight, publications like what John has been describing, much better tools, data. So tell our audience, what should they be watching for to see this first domino to shift, to fall, to sort of drive this? Who's going to be the first player you think that has an impact on this? Is it going to be the big three vertically integrated? Is it going to be the smaller, more nimble PBMs and health plans? Where should our audience be looking for signs that our optimism is becoming reality? So I don't know, John, you want to go first, or Brian, you want to go first, but to me, I think it's going to come from the smaller PBMs. I'll give you guys a second to think, right? I think it's going to come from the smaller, more nimble, more technology-savvy entities entering the marketplace. They're going to go to their employers, like I said a little bit before, and say to them, hey, look, we have this new design. We have these new approaches towards patient cost sharing and rebating and data, and they will gain market share and then force attention from the bigger guys. But I could be wrong. So, John, why don't we start with you?
Jayson, I'd like to see the PBMs be less the visionary and more the vendor. And for me, my focus is on the large employers. I would like to see the large employers say, hey, there's all this attention over here. There's been some policy making. All of that work has opened our eyes to the fact that we offer health benefits so that we can recruit and retain a high quality workforce and have them show up and be productive for us, as opposed to being homesick or having to take time off to care for a loved one. So for that reason, we want to start designing benefits that matter to patients and having insurance that functions the way insurance does. And whoever can offer that for them, whoever can build that for them, whether it's, the big three using their market share to, build change, or whether it's a more nimble PBM. I think that remains to be seen. But again, as Sean Greminger would remind me, stop talking about insurers as payers. The real payers, the real purchasers, are the employers of the 230 million Americans, which represent the largest source of insurance coverage in the United States.
I mean, it's super tempting to agree with both of you. I mean, what I'm curious to see is the first case study from an employer to say, we did X and here's what happened, Y for our employers. Costs went down, or out of pockets went down, or premiums went down, or they didn't, but satisfaction went up, or we took some other kind of static out of the system. And at this point, you have some high profile employers who have obviously gone to smaller, mid-sized PBMs. Lilly got a lot of attention for that. Tyson Foods got a lot of attention for that. And clearly the big three PBMs kind of have been awoken to the fact that there is not only regulatory demands around this, but there's demands among their customer base. So I would love to see one of Sean's member companies or member coalitions come out and say, look, we did this, we put this in place, and here's the after effects. Because I think to John's point, that's the kind of thing that's going to drive people's attention. You can talk about theoretically, how your benefits should be designed up one side and down the other. And we've been having that conversation at both the big and little PBM level, for most of the last half decade. But I think it's when you start seeing these success stories that it starts to become tangible to, again, the people who actually at the end of the day write the checks for healthcare in America.
Right. And that's a self-insured employer. I agree. Right. Those that are paying for it, right, should be the one that they'll likely be driving the innovation. So as we head towards the end of our time together, John, give us a preview of sort of what's next for NPC. What are you working on? What are you excited about over the next couple of months from your organization's perspective?
There's a lot happening in healthcare right now, and we're gonna continue to generate evidence that matters. Another big takeaway that I had that was really energizing for me coming back from ISPOR is Inma Hernandez, longtime friend and researcher, now working at CMS, presented this chart. And this chart showed IRA, MFP, 340B, ASP, right? And showed this audience of health economists how all of these things fit together. And my concern as a drug wonk is you go on LinkedIn and here's the 340B crowd, here's the ASP spiral crowd, here's the commercial gross to net bubble crowd. And there's not a realization that all of these things feed into each other. And that's why more than half of what we call drug spending today is going to someone other than the manufacturer that takes the risk of developing that medicine and actually bringing it to a patient. So while it's tempting for policymakers to view all of these, programs as little cuts, my fear is that we're starting to cut deeper and deeper, and we run the risk of hitting an artery. And by that, I mean, we could reach a point where the revenue being generated on a new medicine is no longer able to generate the kind of research and development that leads to the next medicine, particularly in an environment where only 1 of 10 medicines that are investigated, will ultimately be approved and reach a patient. So I'm concerned about the focus on cost containment. I'm concerned about sort of the demonization of programs like accelerated approval that allow medicines to reach a patient on average 3 years earlier. Many of those medicines have gone on to be converted to traditional approval, and our research and J&J's showed that There have been some 250,000 lives gained or life years gained in oncology alone since 2022 as a result of the accelerated approval program. So again, I feel this coming pressure on patient access to new medicines, whether that's insurance access to medicines that are available today or the ability to generate new medicines for people in the future. And as someone who's been caring for two parents, with cancer over the last decade and a half, I want there to continue to be medicines available.
Brian, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm super curious on how big Inma's chart was. If she captured all of that in a single document, that's an accomplishment. But honestly, like it's hard to add anything to what John said. There's clearly a path forward to a more rational system that's going to check all those boxes. And I think the question is whether or not we have a current system that is so unwieldy that it's going to make getting there more difficult than it needs to be. But I'm thankful that we got the right people pushing the right policies.
Look, we're living in a golden age of biomedical innovation, and we can't pay for today's treatments and tomorrow's cures with yesterday's reimbursement system that was built for blood pressure drugs and cholesterol medicines. So we're going to continue to do the important research on the things that matter most for patient access, because good policy begins with good evidence. So we'll keep at it, and I appreciate you having us on today.
Thank you very much for those insightful words, John. Really appreciate it, and your time today and Brian's time. And that wraps up this episode of Value-Based Voices, brought to you by the Association for Value-Based Cancer Care. Special thanks to both Brian and John for sharing your insights, and to you, our listeners, for joining the conversation. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking, be sure to subscribe to Value-Based Voices wherever you get your podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes that spotlight the voices shaping the future of oncology. Thank you very much.